Titletown. That's what they call it anyway. Some believe it's where things all started, the NFL as we know it. But before Rodgers and Favre, or even Lombardi and Starr, there was a man named Curly Lambeau. The story starts with him and his high school rival turned business partner, George Whitney Calhoun, way back in 1919. Packers. It's a peculiar name, isn't it? The only publicly owned franchise all began with Curly. Mr. Lambeau worked for a meatpacking company, known as the Indian Packing Company. Now Curly, who was a football man, had an idea of starting a professional football team, but was short on funds. They needed uniforms and equipment, after all. So what did Curly do? He did what any smart businessman does. He went to his employer for funds, and shockingly, the company agreed, under one condition, that the team be named after their sponsor. And the Packers were born. A year after joining the American Professional Football Association, or the APFA, the league became known as the National Football League. The Packers were almost forfeited due to financial troubles in their earliest years, but thanks to a group of financial backers known as the Hungry Five, the franchise was saved from forfeiture, and this group of backers would become the Green Bay Football Corporation. In the first 2 years of the franchise, the Packers struggled to find their footing, as many new teams do. But then, from 1923 to 1927, the team rattled off at least 7 wins in every season, culminating with a runner-up finish in 27. But the 1930s would be even better. It started in 1929 when the Packers won their first title under Curly Lambeau with a 12-0-1 record. After their first title in 29, the team rattled off 2 more championships in 1930 and 1931 for 3 straight. In 32, the Packers fell just short of 4 straight, finishing as runner-ups again, but then started a slide for the next few years, until the arrival of Don Hutson from Alabama in 1935. Hutson was innovative in the passing game, inventing pass patterns, and would lead the league in receiving for 8 seasons, as well as help the Packers to 2 more titles in the decade. Their first NFL championship game win came over Washington Redskins in 1936, with a score of 21-6. The following year, the Packers made it back to the championship game, but failed to repeat, losing to the Giants in 1937, 23-17. After a brief hiatus in 38, the Packers won their second NFL championship game in 1939, avenging their loss to the Giants by throttling them in the rematch, 27-0. Starting to understand why they call it Titletown? The Packers remained relevant for the next few seasons, with Don Hutson winning league MVP in 1940 and 1941. And in 1944, the franchise won their 6th NFL championship, with a rubber match victory over the Giants, 14-7. But after their last title, things would start to go haywire in the late years under Curly. Hutson retired in 1945, setting 18 NFL records in his career. And after 3 straight seasons finishing barely above 500 and missing the playoffs, the Packers started their slide. In the final 2 years under Curly Lambeau, the man who started it all, the Packers finished 3-9 and 2-10. And Curly left the team in 1949 after 29 seasons as coach. Just prior to that, Lambeau had actually purchased a lodge for team members and family to live in, known as Rockwood Lodge. In 1950, the year after Curly left, the lodge wildly burned down, and the insurance money paid for the franchise's debts. While the financial troubles were squashed, the Packers' on-field issues were not, as the team continued to slide under Gene Ronzani, Leslie Blackburn, and Ray McClain. Over the next 9 seasons, the Packers finished with a dismal 32-74-2 record, culminating with a horrendous 1-10-1 record in 1958 under McClain. But in 1959, everything would change, and a legend was soon to be born. Just before the turn of the decade, an assistant coach for the Giants, a man by the name of Vince Lombardi, took over, and many were skeptical that Vince would be the reason for some sort of miraculous turnaround. Boy, were they wrong. After a 7-5 record in 1959, the winningest season the Packers had had since 1944, Lombardi showed just how great he was. Under Lombardi, legendary offensive players such as Bart Starr, Forrest Gregg, Paul Hornung, Jim Taylor, and Jerry Kramer would take the field for the Packers, as well as defensive studs Ray Nitschke, Willie Wood, Willie Davis, Henry Jordan, and Herb Adderley. In 1960, only the second year under Lombardi, the Packers made their first NFL championship in over 15 seasons, but lost the Eagles 13-17. This new Packers team was a far cry from what they had been for well over a decade. In 1961, Lombardi won his first title as head coach in crushing fashion, destroying the Giants, his former team, 37-0. The Packers scored 24 points in the second quarter, with Hornung scoring 19 of them. He won the MVP that season. Lombardi won Coach of the Year, and the Packers officially became Titletown. In 1962, the Packers repeated for their 8th title, beating the Giants again 16-7. Jim Taylor was league MVP that season. In 63, they won the Playoff Bowl, a consolation game at the time, over the Browns, and finished the season with an 11-2-1 record. For those unfamiliar with the postseason consolation game, it was a game played in the NFL from 1961 to 1969, where the runner-up in the Eastern Conference played the runner-up in the Western Conference. Essentially, it was a third-place game. Anyway, in 64, the Pack lost the Playoff Bowl to the Cardinals after a second straight runner-up finish in the NFL's Western Conference. In 1965, the Packers returned to first-place form, although they tied with the Colts in the Western Conference, and were required to play a conference playoff matchup to determine who would play for the league championship. In a tightly contested matchup, the game turned controversial in overtime. With a chance to win the game, Don Chandler, the Packers kicker, appeared to miss the kick wide right, but the official signaled the field goal to be good. Of course, instant replay was not in effect at the time, so the Packers won the game and advanced to their 4th NFL championship under Lombardi, defeating the Browns 23-12 for the already legendary coach's 3rd NFL championship in 5 seasons. After the season, NFL goalposts were made taller to help avoid controversial rulings. Lombardi had reached mythical status in such a short amount of time and was crowned the face of the NFL by Time magazine when he was featured on the cover earlier that year. It felt as though Vince had already accomplished so much, but he still had so much left to give to the Packers organization. In 1965, the Packers were back in form. Starr won league MVP, and the Packers won the West again, with a 12-2 record. They won another NFL championship, which was now effectively the NFC Championship due to the AFL and NFL merger, over Tom Landry and the Cowboys, 34-27. Dallas had a chance late in the game, trailing 34-27, but Tom Brown intercepted Cowboys quarterback Don Meredith in the end zone to seal it. In the first Super Bowl in NFL history, the Packers showed why they had become Titletown, winning the inaugural contest over the Chiefs 35-10 for their 10th championship in franchise history. The following season, the Pack were back to defend their Super Bowl crown. They had the best record in the conference again, albeit tied with the Rams, finishing 9-4-1. And Starr repeated as league MVP. The Packers played another conference playoff and defeated the Rams handily, 28-7. In the NFL Championship, the Packers matched up with Landry's Cowboys again in another close contest. This became famously known as the Ice Bowl. Still the coldest game in NFL history, the Packers and Cowboys battled it out at blistering conditions in Lambeau Field, with everything on the line. Trailing 14-17 with 16 seconds left, Bart Starr's quarterback sneak put the Packers ahead 21-17 and propelled them to their 2nd straight Super Bowl appearance. It appeared as though the Packers had the Cowboys' number. In Super Bowl II against the Raiders, the Pack showed why they were the defending champs, blowing out Oakland 33-14 for their 11th title. Lombardi and the Pack were still at the top of their game. Then, shockingly, Lombardi stepped down as head coach to focus on his general manager duties, naming Phil Bengtson as his successor. There is still a lot of questions surrounding why Vince stepped down. Lombardi himself cited the impracticality that came with handling both the role as general manager and head coach. He acknowledged that burnout and fatigue were major contributing factors, but others believe there was more to the story. Many said that Lombardi desired more control, angling for ownership stake in the team. After just 1 season as general manager, Lombardi left. Although it was rumored he said he had little desire to return to coaching, it became evident after his move to the Redskins that this wasn't the case. Lombardi took the head coaching job in Washington after the 1968 season, and after just 1 season coaching Washington, he tragically passed away from cancer in 1970. Just like that, the game's most legendary leader was gone too soon. After the departure of Lombardi, his leadership would be sorely missed, as the Packers entered the most brutal period in their franchise's storied history. Over the next 22 seasons, the Packers would struggle to find any footing at all. In 68, 69, and 70, the Packers struggled without Lombardi as coach, missing the playoffs in all 3 seasons under successor Bengtson, and just like that, the first coach after Lombardi was gone. In the 70s, the Packers made the playoffs 1 time, with 8 losing seasons. The first 4 seasons were under Dan Devine, who actually won Coach of the Year in 1972, and oversaw the franchise's only playoff berth in the decade, which was a loss to the Redskins, 16-3 in the divisional playoffs. After 2 losing seasons in 73 and 74, Devine was gone, mostly due to a disastrous trade for aging quarterback John Haddle, when he sent 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a third-round pick to the Rams for the quarterback. Haddle played only a season and a half for the Packers. Devine was out, and beloved Packers quarterback Bart Starr took over as coach. While there was much excitement at the time, this would not turn out to be the change Packers faithful were hoping for. From 75 to 79, Starr's Packers had 1 winning season, finishing 8-7-1 in 1978. At the turn of the decade, little changed. The Packers finished 5-10-1 in 1980 and 8-8 in 1981. In the strike-shortened season in 1982, things improved a bit. The Packers made the playoffs for the first time under Starr, blowing out the Cardinals 41-16 in the first round of the playoffs, but losing the next round to Landry and the Cowboys 26-37. It appears, maybe, that the Packers didn't have the Cowboys' number after all. After 82, Starr and the Packers finished 8-8 in 83, and after the season, the Packers exchanged 1 former Lombardi player for another at head coach. Starr was out, and Forrest Gregg was in. Things didn't improve under Gregg either, with back-to-back 8-8 records in 84 and 85. Followed by 2 losing seasons in 86 and 87. Just like that, Gregg was gone as well. Lindy Infante took over, and wasn't great in his first year, finishing 4-12, but won Coach of the Year in 1989 with a 10-6 record, even though the Packers missed the playoffs. He might have won the award strictly based on the drastic improvement in record. The award wasn't the headline for the Packers that season, though. The selection of Tony Mandarich was. Green Bay selected the massive offensive lineman 2nd overall, and this would turn out to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest miss in NFL history. Mandarich was taken ahead of 3 Hall of Famers and sandwiched between 4. Aikman went 1 to the Cowboys. Tony was obviously taken 2nd, followed by Barry Sanders, Deion Sanders, and Derek Thomas. Tony failed to live up to the hype, and after only 4 seasons with the Packers, was released. At the turn of the decade, things went back to bad for the Pack. Infante had 2 more losing seasons and was let go. From 68 to 91, the Packers had 15 losing seasons. Over the last 24 years, the record was 145, 201, and 9. They made the playoffs only 2 times, winning only 1 playoff game. Titletown had fallen down and were in desperate need of something to pick them back up, and yet there appeared to be hope on the horizon. In 1991, the Pack hired Ron Wolf as GM and tasked him with leading the team out of over 2 decades of futility. His first major move was to hire 49ers offensive coordinator Mike Holmgren, who spent 6 seasons with the Niners, winning 2 Super Bowls, one as quarterback's coach and the other as OC, and shortly after, made the biggest move probably of all. He traded a first-round pick to the Falcons for Brett Favre, a quarterback who only played 2 games as a rookie, throwing just 4 passes, 2 of which were interceptions. And, on top of that, also had lingering concerns about a hip injury he suffered in the East-West Shrine game. Many doctors said Favre would play 5, maybe 6 years in the NFL at most. There were character concerns surrounding the quarterback, and Packers brass, outside of Wolf, were not very enthused about the trade, with several opposing the trade entirely. Wolf was so convinced that Favre was the guy, however, that he waived the contingency clause in the trade negotiation, meaning that even if Favre failed the physical, which he did, the trade still went through. After a ton of discussions, emotional moments, and questions, Favre was a Packer. He was the guy for Wolf, and he was the guy for Holmgren. And in 1992, the first under Holmgren, things finally started to turn around. In week 3, starting quarterback Don Majkowski went down, and it was Brett's time to shine. He led a tremendous comeback in his first game as a Packer, including a 94-yard game-winning touchdown drive, capped off by a 35-yard touchdown pass to Kittrick Taylor, with 13 seconds left. The Favre era had officially begun. Mike Holmgren's West Coast offense began to take hold, and Sterling Sharp broke out as a serious weapon for Favre and the Packers. They finished the season 9-7, their first winning season since '89. Just missing the playoffs. But Titletown started to feel like they may finally have their spark back. In 1993, things really turned around. Wolf made another tremendous move, signing stud Eagles defensive end Reggie White in free agency. Favre had another year in Holmgren's system, and the momentum was real. After starting 1-3 though, things began to look bleak. But the Packers rattled off 3 straight to get to 4-3. and sat at 9-6, with a matchup against division rival Detroit looming in Week 18, needing a win on the road to clinch the division. Unfortunately, Favre and Holmgren were unable to get the job done, losing to Detroit 30-20, finishing 9-7, but still managed to make the playoffs, even after finishing third in the NFC Central. In the wild card round, the Packers matched up with the Lions, again at the Silverdome, and there was concern that the Packers may fall short once again. But this game would be different. It was very close, and with time winding down in the fourth quarter, this happened. Favre to Sharp, a phrase that still haunts Lions fans to this day. Just like that, the Packers had knocked division rival Detroit out of the playoffs. They got their first playoff win in over a decade and showed that the Holmgren Favre hype was real. The following week, the Pack fell to the eventual Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys, 27-17, but things had definitely turned around in Titletown. In 1994, things remained relatively the same for the Packers. They finished 9-7 again, with a playoff berth. And this would be the final year they would play some games at Milwaukee County Stadium, moving to Lambeau full-time the next year. With more promise on the horizon, but rumblings about whether Holmgren and Favre had peaked, devastation struck the franchise. In Week 16, superstar receiver Sterling Sharp went down. The injury was to Sharp's neck and would end the Star's career. From that point forward, the Packers would need to add new weapons to help Favre. In the playoffs without Sharp, the Packers were able to top division rival Detroit for the second straight season in the wildcard round, 16-12, but once again failed to get past the defending Super Bowl champion Cowboys, getting blown out 35-9 in the divisional round. Had Green Bay peaked, or was the loss of Sharp simply too much for the Pack to overcome in 1994? In 1995, the Packers improved their record, finishing 11-5. But most importantly, Favre proved Ron Wolf right. Brett exploded, winning his first MVP and Offensive Player of the Year awards, throwing for over 4,400 yards and 38 touchdowns. The Packers won the Central for the first time since 1962, a drought that lasted over 2 decades. It felt as though the Packers had answered the question of whether or not they had peaked, and that answer appeared to be no. Green Bay handled the Falcons in the wildcard round, winning 37-20, and backed it up the following week against the Niners, 27-17. The Packers, finally, were in the NFC Championship game, matched up with, yep, you guessed it, the Cowboys. Would this be the year the Packers would finally get over the juggernaut Cowboys, who had ended their Super Bowl aspirations the past 2 seasons? Dallas jumped out to a 14-3 lead in the first quarter, thanks to 2 touchdown passes from Aikman to Irvin, but Green Bay would come storming back. Favre hit Brooks on a 73-yard touchdown to pull within 4, and that hit Jackson for a 24-yard score to pull ahead. But then the Cowboys added a field goal to tie, and then another touchdown to pull ahead, 24-17. However, the Packers were determined to fight back and did not want to fall again to the Cowboys. They added 10 unanswered of their own, going back up 3, with the score 27-24 to end the third. Would the Packers finally get it done? They would not. The fourth quarter was all Cowboys. The 2-time Super Bowl champions scored twice on the legs of Emmitt Smith, holding the Packers scoreless in the final frame, and once again, Green Bay fell short to the Cowboys, this time 1 game away from the Super Bowl, 38-27. It looked like the Packers hadn't peaked, as they were once again inching closer to their ultimate goal. They just simply seemed like they couldn't get past Dallas. But in 1996, things would change in a big way. After several seasons together, Favre and Holmgren were poised to get it done, and the Packers had their best regular season yet. For the first time in franchise history, Green Bay won 13 regular season games. They won their second NFC Central crown in a row, and Favre won his second MVP. Would this finally be the year Holmgren and Favre got it done? In the divisional round, the Pack walloped the Niners, 35-14. A week later, in the NFC Championship game, they did it again, beating up on the Panthers 30-13. The Packers, after winning Super Bowls 1 and 2, were playing for their chance to win the trophy, appropriately named after their legendary coach, who won it for the first time 40 seasons prior. In the Super Bowl, the Packers matched up with Bill Parcells and the Patriots. In the first quarter, the teams exploded offensively, scoring what was, at the time, a Super Bowl record, 24 combined points in the first frame. In the second quarter, it was all Packers, as Brett Favre and Green Bay piled on 17 unanswered points, including another Super Bowl record at the time, 81-yard touchdown pass from Favre to Antonio Freeman. The Packers led 27-14 at the break, but the Patriots wouldn't go away quietly. Curtis Martin scored an 18-yard touchdown in the third to make it 27-21, and things got a whole lot closer as Packers fans started to worry, until Desmond Howard did the unthinkable. Howard returned the ensuing kickoff 99 yards to the house, another Super Bowl record at the time, putting the Packers up 35-21. Both defenses held stout for the remainder of the game, and that would be the final tally. The Lombardi Trophy was finally headed back to Titletown. Desmond Howard won Super Bowl MVP for his return performances, the first special teams player to ever win Super Bowl MVP. The questions of 93, 94, and 95 were finally answered. Ron Wolf was vindicated for his risk he had taken on Favre, and Holmgren had proved he could run the West Coast all on his own. As the defending champs in 1997, the Packers weren't just looking for another solid season. They were poised to start a dynasty. The Pack went 13-3 again. Favre won his third straight MVP, becoming the first player to do so. The Packers had now officially owned the Central, winning the division for the third season in a row. It wasn't just winning time in Titletown, it felt like repeat time. After all, the town's first two Super Bowls came in a pair. With Favre as MVP, Freeman breaking out as a legitimate weapon, and Reggie White dominating on the defensive side of the ball, it felt as though the Packers were all but destined to defend their title. They started things off right in the divisional round, defeating the Buccaneers 21-7. And then ending the Niners season for the second straight year, 23-10. Keep that in mind for later. But the Packers were back in the Super Bowl, with a chance to defend their title. Facing off against the Broncos, the defending champs got things going early, scoring the first touchdown of the game on a 22-yard pass from Favre to Freeman, and found themselves up 7-0. But Elway and the Broncos weren't going to be an easy out, scoring 17 unanswered, and all of a sudden, the defending champs found themselves down 10 in the second quarter. Champs, like they normally do, bounced back though. They scored on another Favre touchdown pass, and opened the second half scoring with a field goal of their own to knot it at 17. However, the Broncos scored again on the legs of Terrell Davis, going up 24-17 in the third, and it became even more obvious that this would be a game that was far from a cakewalk. The Packers responded in the fourth, again with a touchdown pass by Favre, and the game was again tied, 24-24. The Packers had the ball again late in the fourth, and with about 3:40 left on the clock, needed to convert to keep the drive alive. Favre, however, missed a crossbody throw to a wide-open Freeman, a throw he's made thousands of times, and the Broncos now had control. On the ensuing drive, Elway and the Broncos marched down the field, aided by a crucial face mask penalty by the Packers that gave Denver a free 15, but had the ball first and goal at the Packers' 18. It looked as though the Pack might be able to hold the Broncos to a field goal, but another clutch run by Davis put the Broncos at the 1-yard line, and then the inexplicable happened. The Packers, with 2 timeouts and a little over 1:40 remaining on the clock, let Terrell Davis score, instead of trying to stop him. On the Packers' ensuing drive, Favre drove Green Bay into Denver territory. With 3 chances to convert a first down to keep the game alive, Favre threw 3 straight incompletions, and the Broncos were able to hold on for Elway's first Super Bowl, ending Green Bay's repeat hopes in crushing fashion. After the game, Holmgren was asked about the Davis touchdown and indicated that he was unaware that it was second down. This drastically changed Holmgren's strategy on the goal line defensive stand, and was a significant blunder by a Super Bowl winning coach in the game's most crucial moments. On the biggest stage, Holmgren failed the Packers by not knowing the situation, and may have cost his team a chance at a second straight Super Bowl. After 97, the Packers remained a threat. They still had Favre under center. They had multiple All-Pros and Pro Bowlers, and Holmgren was still a phenomenal head coach. In 98, the Packers continued to perform, finishing 11-5, but their aspirations for a 5th straight division title were dashed by the 98 Vikings, who went a staggering 15-1, and were one of the greatest teams to never win a Super Bowl. In the playoffs, the Packers matched up with the Niners for the 3rd straight season, a team they handled the previous 2 seasons. There was plenty of back and forth scoring in the game, but the Packers found themselves in position to, once again, end the Niners season, leading 27-23 with just under 2 minutes left, needing only 1 defensive stop to hold on. This game, however, would be different. The Niners and Steve Young drove down the field, deep into Packers territory. At the 25-yard line, with only 14 seconds left on the clock and no timeouts, Steve Young appeared to throw an interception, ending the game. But the pass was ruled incomplete, and then, with 8 seconds left on 3rd and 3, Young and T.O. ended it. The 25-yard dart would prove to be the game winner, as Owens incredibly endured tremendous punishment from Packers defenders to clinch the win for San Francisco, avenging their losses to the Packers the previous 2 seasons. After the season, 2 shocking changes occurred in Green Bay. The first was the retirement of Reggie White, following the loss to San Fran. And the second, and even more surprising of the 2 changes, was Holmgren's decision to leave Green Bay for Seattle. The reason? It was reported to be similar to Lombardi. Holmgren wanted more control, and wanted to have GM responsibilities as well. The Packers remained loyal to Wolf, the man who brought them Favre and helped lead them out of the dark ages. And just like that, the Packers were without their Super Bowl winning head coach. 99 and 2000 were transitionary years for Green Bay. They missed the playoffs in both seasons, finishing 8-8 in their only season under Ray Rhodes, and then 9-7 in their first year under Mike Sherman. In 2001, Wolf was gone, and the Packers trio left only Favre, with Sherman assuming general manager duties. One of the major GM decisions was to trade Matt Hasselbeck and a first-rounder to the Seahawks for a first-round and third-round pick, moving up several spots in the first round to select Jamal Reynolds, defensive end out of Florida State. This move was actually made by Ron Wolf, though, who didn't leave until after the draft. In 2001, the Pack were back. They went 12-4, but finished runner-up in the division to the Bears. In the wild card round, the Pack got back on track against the Niners, beating their playoff rival 25-15. But a week later, their Super Bowl aspirations were dashed by the greatest show on turf in crushing fashion, 45-17. In 2002, the Pack were officially back, climbing their way back to the top of the NFC North with another 12-4 record under Sherman and Favre. Would the Packers finally get back to the Super Bowl? They would not, as the Packers were once again bounced from the playoffs in unceremonious fashion, losing 27-7 against the Falcons. This loss, however, stung even more than most, as it was the first time in franchise history the Packers had lost at home in the playoffs, another thing to keep in mind. In 2003, the Packers had a chance to repeat in the North, and it would come down to a final play, just not in the Packers game. Earlier in the season, it should be noted that on Monday Night Football against the Raiders, Brett Favre had one of the best performances of his career. Tragically, Brett had lost his father the day before, and against Oakland, Brett showed what made him truly special, throwing for 399 yards and 4 touchdowns with a heavy heart. The Packers would be 9-6 heading into the final week, needing a win and a Minnesota Vikings loss to clinch the division. The Packers handled their business, throttling Denver 31-3, but still needed that Minnesota loss, which seemed very unlikely, given the Vikings were playing the 3-12 Cardinals. In the final seconds of Vikings-Cardinals, the game proved a lot closer than the records would have predicted, and on the final play of the game, the Cardinals miraculously knocked the Vikings out of the playoffs with a last-second touchdown. Playoff-bound and NFC North champions once again, the Packers matched up with Hasselbeck and Seattle in the wild-card round. The game was hotly contested. Sean Alexander had 3 touchdowns, the third of which sent the game to overtime. In the extra frame, Matt Hasselbeck had an iconic moment, but maybe a moment he wishes he had back. After winning the coin toss in OT, Hasselbeck said, "We want the ball and we're going to score." The Seahawks started to move down the field, and then, just like that, a score happened. Hasselbeck threw an interception to Al Harris, who returned the ball 52 yards for a touchdown, ending the game. Someone scored on the drive, just not Hasselbeck and the Seahawks. In the following week, against the Eagles, the Packers started off hot, scoring the first 14 points of the game. It looked like the Packers were going to get back to the NFC Championship, but the Eagles battled back, and late in the fourth quarter, made a miraculous play to keep their chances alive. On 4th and 26, down to what looked like their last shot, McNabb fired a pass to Freddie Mitchell to keep the Eagles' chances alive. Akers made the kick later in the drive, and the game was tied 17-17 as the final horn sounded in the fourth. The Packers were in overtime for the second straight playoff game. This time, there would be no game-saving interception for a touchdown. In fact, it was Favre who made the error in the extra frame. With the ball in overtime, Favre fired a deep pass down the field, and the ball was intercepted by the Eagles. The Eagles capitalized, winning the game on the leg of David Akers, and the Packers were sent home once again. Over the next several years, the Packers remained relevant, but it started to appear as though things weren't quite the same as they once were. In 2004, the Packers lost 4 of their first 5, but battled back to finish 10-6. They managed to win the North again, and faced division rival Minnesota in the wildcard round. In the game, it was pretty much all Vikings, as Minnesota took an early 17-3 lead after the first quarter, and managed to answer every Packers comeback effort, winning the game 31-17. In 2005, things got worse. The Packers made a drastic move, a move that could make or break their future success as a franchise. Rather than drafting a player to help Favre and the Packers get over the top, they drafted his successor, Aaron Rodgers, in the first round with the 24th overall pick. This angered Favre, who said that it wasn't his job to mentor Rodgers, and he was focused on winning games. With questions surrounding just how long Favre would be able to continue playing, the Packers needed to make a move to ensure the long-term success of the franchise, and they did just that. In the 2005 season, the Packers had their worst record under Favre, and their first losing season since 1991. They finished 4-12, and Sherman was out as head coach. In 2006, the first season under new coach Mike McCarthy, the Packers finished 8-8, missing the playoffs again. But in 2007, it looked as though the Packers had their answer at head coach. The Pack were back again, finishing 13-3, with the new additions of A.J. Hawk and Charles Woodson the year prior making their presence felt. they won the North again and faced the Seahawks in the playoffs. Again, after falling down 14-0 early, thanks to 2 Ryan Grant fumbles in the first 69 seconds, the Pack turned it on, came back, and cruised past the Seahawks with ease in the divisional round, 42-20. The Packers were in the NFC Championship once again, and it started to feel like this would be their last shot to win another Super Bowl with Favre under center. In the championship, the Packers faced off against the red-hot New York Giants, who just snuck into the playoffs and looked like a tough out. The game was the 3rd coldest in NFL history to date, and it became obvious the Packers were going to have their hands full. The Giants jumped out to an early 6-0 lead, but the Packers scored 10 unanswered to close out the first half, leading the pesky Giants 10-6 at the break. From that point forward, the game would be back and forth until the bitter end. The Giants scored, then the Packers retook the lead. Then the Giants scored again, and the Pack tied it up with a field goal to make it 20-20. The Giants had a chance to win on the final drive, but missed a field goal as time expired, to give the Packers new hope in overtime. After getting the ball to start overtime, would there be some final heroics from Favre to send the Packers back to the Super Bowl? There would not, as Brett, once again, threw an interception. The Giants capitalized, drove into field goal range, and sent the Packers home, 1 game shy of the Super Bowl. This would be Favre's final game as a Packer. After the season, the Packers decided it was time to move on from Brett. He was traded to the Jets, and the quarterback they drafted in the first round a few years prior took over. It was Aaron Rodgers' time in Green Bay. The first season with Rodgers under center proved painful, as the Packers missed the playoffs with a 6-10 record. In 2009, however, it became apparent that the decision to take Rodgers was a good one. The Packers finished 11-5 in Rodgers' second season. They didn't win the North, but managed to make the playoffs and faced off against the Cardinals in the wild card round. In arguably the craziest playoff game in NFL history, Packers and Cardinals threw heavyweight punch after heavyweight punch all the way to the bitter end. The Cardinals controlled almost the whole game, leading at different times 17-0, 31-10, and 38-24. But Rodgers and the Packers would not go away quietly. They continued to battle back, scoring 14 unanswered in the fourth quarter to tie the game at 38 apiece. After the Cardinals responded with yet another touchdown to pull ahead 45-38, Green Bay continued to show their fight, tying the game once again at 45-all on a touchdown pass by Rodgers. The game was headed to overtime. In another overtime game, the Packers once again got the ball first. Would it be different this time, or would another turnover plague the Packers in overtime? It would be the latter. The Packers would fumble on their possession. Carlos Dansby returned at 17 yards for a Cardinals touchdown. And just like that, the historically high-scoring game was over. The heartache continued in Green Bay, but there was hope that things might turn around, and the Packers would finally get over the hump. After a 10-6 finish to the 2010 season, the Packers finished second in the North behind the Bears, but there were signs this Packers team would be different. Although they lost 6 games, they were the only team in NFL history to not lose by more than 4 points, and never trailed by more than 7 the entire season. In the playoffs, the Packers showed how good they truly were. After a close 21-16 win over the Eagles in the wildcard round, the Packers blew out the Falcons 48-21. They were back in the NFC Championship game, this time against their arch-rival Chicago Bears. In only the second playoff meeting between the two teams, the game was extremely close. The Packers scored the first 14 points of the game, leading 14-0 at halftime. After a scoreless third quarter, the Bears scored to pull within 7, but later, in the fourth, B.J. Raji would make a play that will forever haunt Bears fans and forever be remembered by Packers faithful.
Take B.J. Raji for the touchdown.
After the touchdown, the Bears tried to come back, scoring again to pull within 7, but they simply didn't have enough to overcome the loss of quarterback Jay Cutler, and the Packers held on to win 21-14, advancing to their first Super Bowl since 1997 and their first with Aaron Rodgers under center. In the Super Bowl, the Packers showed why they were such a force to be reckoned with, and why they were 3-0 on the road in the postseason. They took a 21-10 lead after the first half, and while Pittsburgh continued to battle, scoring a touchdown to pull within 4, the Packers were determined to get it done. A touchdown pass from Rodgers to Jennings, coupled with solid defense and field goal from Mason Crosby in the final frame, were all the Packers needed to hold off Pittsburgh. Aaron Rodgers had his first Lombardi. The Packers had their fourth, and Titletown was once again atop the mountain. After the franchise's fourth Super Bowl, the Packers enjoyed an incredible ride with Rodgers under center, but the major question was whether or not he would get his second, which his predecessor, Favre, came close to accomplishing, but never quite got there. In 2011, the Packers looked poised to repeat. They finished 15-1, had the number 1 seed, and Rodgers won his first MVP. In the playoffs, things were looking good for Green Bay, matching up with the Giants in the divisional round. The Packers looked like they were headed for their second straight NFC Championship game, and well on their way to defending their title, until they weren't. The pesky Giants, once again, derailed Green Bay's title hopes, winning in convincing fashion 37-20, and later winning the Super Bowl. This result stung, but unfortunately was a sign of things to come for Green Bay and Rodgers. In 2012, the Pack made the playoffs again, finishing 11-5 and winning the North. They managed to defeat the Vikings in the wildcard round, but once again, fell short of the Super Bowl, losing to the 49ers 45-31. The defense in the playoffs looked like it was starting to become an issue. In 2013, it was more of the same. The Packers won the North, thanks to an awesome victory in the winner-take-all matchup between them and Chicago, but fell short in the playoffs, losing to the Niners, again, 23-20. In 2014, the Packers defended the North, this time at 12-4. Aaron Rodgers won his second MVP, and Green Bay looked like they had another great chance at a Super Bowl. In the divisional round, they bested the Cowboys in a very close battle and benefited from a controversial no-catch rule on a pass to Dez Bryant that could have sealed it for the Cowboys.
To their beast and hope he makes a play, and he does! It's ruled a touchdown.
This was the famous Dez caught it game. The following week, in the NFC Championship, the Packers looked poised to make it back to the Super Bowl, leading the Seahawks 19-7. With time dwindling in the fourth, Packers tragically collapsed. Even though the Packers forced 5 turnovers in the game, they only managed to score 6 points off those turnovers. Maybe the defense wasn't the problem. After intercepting Wilson for the 4th time, the Packers went ultra-conservative. They only took 10 seconds off the clock before giving the ball back to Seattle, who scored on their next drive, then recovered an onside kick, and scored again to miraculously take the lead 22-19 after an insane 2-point conversion. Rodgers and the Packers managed to force overtime with a Crosby field goal, but Wilson and Seattle put the Packers away in overtime, scoring on the first possession of overtime in the extra frame to send Green Bay home. Success can be extremely painful. In 2015, the Packers failed to defend their North title, but still made the playoffs. The Pack lost Jordy Nelson for the year that season, and the young Davante Adams was still struggling to find his footing. They started 6-0, but faltered down the stretch due to offensive issues, finishing 4-6 in their final 10. Although the Pack weren't at their absolute best that season, there wasn't a shortage of memorable moments, especially in Motown, where Aaron Rodgers and the Packers crushed the spirit of Detroit on the game's final play. In the playoffs, the Packers handled the Redskins rather easily, winning 35-18, and matched up with the Cardinals in the divisional round. I think you know where this is going. In another absolutely epic playoff game between the Packers and Cardinals, Larry Fitzgerald had a legendary performance, but would it be enough to stave off Rodgers' magic? Late in the game, trailing by 7, with less than 2 minutes left, the Packers faced a 4th and 20, and it looked like the game was all but over, until Rodgers said, "Watch this." Aaron threw an absolute laser beam to Janis to keep the Packers' hopes alive, and then, with 5 seconds left on the clock, parlayed it with this throw. Another pass to Janis, another Hail Mary, and the Packers' hopes were still alive, heading to overtime.
And Janis, does he stop it? Oh.
Until enter Larry Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald is going to take it into Green Bay territory. Larry Fitzgerald inside the 30, the 20.
Who sprinted through the heart of the Green Bay defense, crushing the Packers' hopes, sending Rodgers and company home. Even with the tough end of their season, there was a lot of hope left that Rodgers would be able to surpass his predecessor Favre. But in 2016, the Packers struggled through their first 10, with a 4-6 record, until Rodgers famously predicted that the Packers were going to run the table. Run the table they did, as Green Bay won their final 6 games to finish 10-6 and bring home the North crown. Jordy won Comeback Player of the Year, and the Packers were hot heading into the playoffs. In the first round, the Packers crushed the Giants 38-13. A bit of sweet revenge, highlighted by another incredible Rodgers Hail Mary just before halftime. In the divisional round, they matched up with the top-seeded Cowboys. The Packers stayed hot, battling the Cowboys until the bitter end, and ending Dallas' season on the leg of Mason Crosby. Would the Packers get it done this year? They, unfortunately, would not, as they ran into a buzzsaw in MVP Matt Ryan and the Falcons in the NFC Championship, losing 44-21. After the electric 2016 season, there was still hope that the Packers had plenty more chances under Rodgers, but there are questions on whether or not they could get it done as currently constituted. Those questions were answered over the course of the next 2 seasons, as the Packers had 2 straight losing seasons, with records of 7-9 and 6-9-1. In 2017, the Packers lost Aaron Rodgers to a collarbone injury, and in 2018, failed to regain their footing. Mike McCarthy was let go, and Packers brass turned the page to whiz kid Matt LaFleur, a disciple of the Shanahan coaching tree. The move absolutely paid off for the Packers. In their first season under LaFleur, the turnaround was immediate. The Packers were back in form, still with Rodgers under center, finishing 13-3, winning the North and achieving a second overall seed in the NFC. In the divisional round, they matched up with Seattle and jumped all over the Seahawks, building a 21-3 lead at halftime. Despite Seattle's best efforts, Rodgers and Green Bay were able to stave off a Seattle comeback, besting the Seahawks 28-23 and earning a trip to face LaFleur's mentor and the 49ers in the NFC title game. Would Rodgers get his second in year one under his new coach? The answer would be no, as San Fran continued to be a thorn in the Packers' side, beating Green Bay for a trip to the Super Bowl 37-20. Although it was heartbreaking once again for Packers fans, there was continued hope that the Packers, under LaFleur, with Rodgers still under center, would be able to get it done. The Packers, at this point, were still a tremendous team, but as Green Bay leadership liked to do, they made sure a succession plan was in place, and in the 2020 NFL Draft, as opposed to drafting a receiver in the first round, selected Jordan Love, quarterback out of Utah State, with the 26th overall pick. They often say history repeats itself, and for the most part, that's true. Rodgers was not pleased by the decision to draft his successor, but recognizing how he felt by Favre's response to his selection, decided to take a different path than Brett and took Jordan under his wing. In 2020, even with the first round selection of Love, the Packers won 13 games for the second straight season under LaFleur. Rodgers won his third MVP, and the Packers were, again, a favorite to bring home the Lombardi. In the divisional round, the Packers took care of business against the Rams with a 32-18 victory and earned their second straight trip to the NFC Championship game, this time against Brady and the Bucs. In one of the most hyped matchups in the history of NFL playoff football, fans got everything they asked for, at least in the early going. The Bucs kicked off the scoring, but the Pack answered, and the game was knotted at sevens. The Bucs punched back, going back up by 7, and the Packers added a field goal to pull within 4. From that point forward, though, it would be mostly Bucs. Tampa built a 28-10 lead, adding an incredible touchdown late in the first half on a pass from Brady to Scotty Miller. As the game went on, the Packers did what they could to battle back. They scored 13 unanswered, missing a 2-point conversion attempt in what many considered an interesting decision by LaFleur. The Bucs added another field goal, pulling ahead 31-23, and the Packers were starting to run out of time. And then, something even more puzzling happened. Rodgers managed to drive the Packers deep into Tampa territory and put LaFleur's decision-making to the test, as the Packers faced a fourth down choice: go for a touchdown to try and tie the game, or kick a field goal, needing to stop Brady one more time to have a chance. The young coach, shockingly, took the ball out of his veteran quarterback's hands and kicked the field goal. Brady and the Bucs were able to run out the clock, and it looked like Rodgers' best and final chance at another Lombardi had just passed the Packers by. In 2021, even with the heartbreaking letdown of 2020, the Pack did what the Pack do, going 13-3 for the third straight season, as LaFleur became the first coach in NFL history to win 13 games in his first 3 seasons as head coach. Rodgers won his second consecutive and fourth MVP of his career. The Packers were North champions, and this time held home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Maybe 2020 wasn't their best shot, until it was. In the divisional round of the playoffs, the Packers were amazingly upset by the Niners. The offense struggled, a rarity in the Rodgers playoff era. San Fran continued to have Green Bay's number and headed to the NFC Championship with a 13-10 victory. This was the Packers' fourth loss to San Francisco in the playoffs in the Rodgers era. The next season, it started to become more obvious that Rodgers' time in Green Bay was coming to an end, as Jordan Love was encroaching quickly. The Packers, at 8-8, heading into Week 18, needed only a win over the earlier eliminated Detroit Lions to make the playoffs. In a hard-fought, brutal NFC North battle, the Lions, with nothing to play for, shocked the Packers, as we saw Aaron Rodgers and Randall Cobb walk off Lambeau Field together for the last time. Rodgers was traded to the Jets in the offseason, just like the quarterback who came before him, and was replaced by Jordan Love the following season. In 2023, Love struggled in the early going, and the Packers, one of the youngest teams in the NFL, looked as though they might be missing Rodgers, until Love got hot down the stretch, showing everyone around him why he was a first-round draft pick. After starting 3-6, the Packers went 6-2, made the playoffs, and all of a sudden became a very dangerous out. In the wildcard round, they got the pleasure of playing the 2-seeded Cowboys, and as the Niners had their number, the Packers had the Cowboys' number, absolutely blitzing Dallas. The Pack jumped all over the Cowboys, building a 27-7 lead at halftime, but the bludgeoning did not stop there, as Love and the Packers continued to mercilessly pour it on Dallas, building a massive 48-16 lead. The Cowboys added some garbage time points to make the final tally look a little closer, but this was an indication that the Packers and Love albeit young, were for real. With the victory, the Packers got the privilege of visiting the San Francisco 49ers in the divisional round. But Love and the Packers were hot. They were young and they were hungry. They were the team nobody wanted to face. The Pack kicked off the scoring, going up 3-0 early, and after San Fran responded later in the first with a touchdown, rattled off 10 unanswered points to take a 6-point lead. San Fran added a touchdown of their own, but the Packers came right back with another score and a 2-point conversion to go up 21-14. Would this time against San Francisco finally be different? San Francisco added a field goal after Jordan Love interception, and then another touchdown after a missed field goal by Anders Carlson. It was now 24-21 Niners, but Green Bay still had a shot. On the ensuing drive, Love, looking more like Favre than he did Rodgers, made a mistake that many young quarterbacks make, throwing the ball across his body and into the arms of the Niners. San Fran ran out the clock, and the Packers were once again going home at the hands of the Niners. Last season, the Packers, still the youngest in the league, showed that they have a lot of special about them, but a ton of growing to do. They finished 11-6, with 5 of their losses coming against teams with 14 or more wins: the Lions, Vikings, and Eagles. Love struggled with injuries throughout the season and didn't seem to be himself. Yet, they made the playoffs again, but simply couldn't match up with the strength of Philly, with some self-inflicted wounds of their own, and lost to the eventual Super Bowl champions 22-10. In this year's draft, the Packers changed their strategy, adding Matthew Golden, their first-round receiver in 25 years. They still have the youngest team in football, and Titletown is as dangerous as ever. Green Bay, Wisconsin, Curly Lambeau, Vince Lombardi, Bart Starr, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Lambeau Field, the Packers. What a history. What a story. And while it may have been a little while since their last title, the Packers will forever be a contender, dangerous as ever. With as much winning as the Packers faithful have experienced, there's bound to be plenty of heartbreak, with immense joy sprinkled in between. They'll be back, that much we do know. And with 4 Lombardi trophies and 13 total championships, it's no wonder they call it Titletown.